My name is John Spain. I'm the Executive Vice President for the Baton Rouge Area Foundation. We are delighted once again to have all of you here. We appreciate you battling the rain, and it is a wonderful crowd. How many of you have been to one or more of these meetings? Well, welcome back. Thank you for taking the journey with us. Tonight is the last night where we're going to ask you to give us input. There'll be one more meeting in July where we come back and share the final report with the community. So we're going to ask you to spend some time today. We're going to give you some background, not so much, but tell you how we got here. We're going to give you some updated information on some of the engineering work we've done, some of the things we've learned about the lake since we last were together. And then I think the thing you'll find most interesting is the latter part of the presentation where we actually show you what we have taken from all of the conversations and all the information that the community has shared, and we're going to break it down. And we're going to look at sections of the lake and show you, or lakes I should say, and show you what we are planning for each part of those lakes. This is a progress that remains in work. I will tell you that we've changed what you'll see tonight several times yesterday and several times today. So some of it we're going to see for the first time together. I think that's healthy. That is what this process is all about. And as we continue to meet with people, we learn more about the lakes and we have changed the plan. The plan has many, many, many things that we all want to do. It's raised the price considerably, and we don't know how we'll pay for it, but it will be phased. So we'll start, we think, by dredging the lakes and getting them back to where they're healthy. And then we hope with public support that we can build confidence in the project, and over time we can look at the other phases and bring in some of the other amenities you've talked to us about. So we can't do everything up front, but our goals as we established in those first meetings was to improve the water quality of the lakes, do so in a way that would sustain them longer so we don't have to do this as often, to build safety in the lakes, and we've talked to you a lot about bike paths and people walking in the middle of dangerous streets with cars. And so we want to talk about some of those issues with you today. We want to preserve marine life and the beautiful birds that we see on the lakes, and so you'll hear that we've paid a lot of attention to that. We've also tried to look at the growth of the use of the lakes, and we've taken great care, we hope you will agree, that there are certain activities that can be done on some parts of the lake which are absolutely inappropriate at other parts of the lake. This has been an interesting process for us. We have probably disappointed some of you, and we may disappoint some of you tonight. We still have other issues that we have not resolved because they're complex. And so when I say this is a work in progress, it is still that. And so I want you to pay attention, if you will. Give us your patience, your understanding, give us your insight, tell us what we got right, and tell us what we still need to work on, because we need that. What you're going to see is a lot of concentration on what we think the first couple of phases look like. And as I just said, there'll be other phases, but we're going to walk you through the restoration of these lakes and most of the safety issues we've talked about. And at some point, we hope that we can find the funding for the additional amenities to be added at some other time. So let me thank LSU and President King Alexander for allowing us to use this facility tonight, and say on behalf of the Baton Rouge Area Foundation, the Center for Planning Excellence, and all of our consulting teams, BREC, the City of Baton Rouge, and LSU, who all in some way have a very critical part beyond just being an owner, but being the people who have to take care and preserve these lakes. They have worked with us for the last year and a half, and we appreciate their partnerships as well. So there'll be a time for you to ask questions after we go through this thing, and I think you've been given a piece of paper. We'd like for you to collect your questions on those papers, pass them to us. The idea is to look at and take out questions that may be asking the same thing so we can honor your time. So write your questions down as you go through, and we'll try to answer all of them. And myself and team members will be here if you want to grab us and talk to us individually or share your concerns. Please feel free to do that. So on behalf of the Baton Rouge Area Foundation, thank you again for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to the person that has led all of these meetings, our lead consultant, Kinder.
Thank you, John. Okay, I've given this presentation 7 times today to various people. Is Ann Heiss here? I've met some really wonderful people. There she is in the back. Ann, was that sewer pipe in front of your house? The leak? I was afraid of that. And you had nothing to do with it, right? Okay. Because I had an idea that, exactly, I knew it would come back to me. And I had an idea that if we didn't want to do this project at all, we could just change the name from Bayou de Plancher to just Black Bayou, and we could be done here, right? Okay, that's a horrible idea. You guys were supposed to laugh at that, come on. All right, we're not going to do that. We have lots of ideas on how to make sure that sort of stuff does not happen in the future. What I want to say, though, you guys got to look at a lot of pictures out on the walls on the way in. You can definitely look at them on the way back. We're going to look at that stuff here. But it's important to remember that pictures are pictures, right? They're beautiful drawings, and they're all in process. And we've gotten, as John said, we've changed things already just in the, in hours as we learn new information and we get our consultant team together and start coming up with new ideas or honing these ideas. But there's a lot of stuff behind the drawings. There's numbers, right? There's a 30-page cost estimate that goes with this, still in process. There's engineers that we're working with to make sure that that the ideas that we recommend are actually engineer worthy, right? And that those guys actually agree with the things that we're trying to do. They've gone in and done hydrology studies. They've looked upstream at where water comes from, how much water comes into the systems, how that all works. If you go in and start to mess with these things, we want to make sure that they work, that they're better, not worse. So we're in the middle of doing all that. There's lots of just different systems that we're dealing with. We'll look at some of that tonight. There's phasing of understanding where money comes from and when we spend money and how much we can spend and when and how you then can kind of start to build projects out of all that. So the point is that behind the drawings, there's a lot of very detailed information. And at the end of this process, there'll be a big fat book that'll have all that information in it, and you can pore over it. And I'm sure there'll be even more questions at that point. But it's I think it makes for a pretty robust project. Have a seat, thank you. Okay, so destination, the lakes, right? So the project statement, we've gone through this a few times, trying to make sure that we understood what's going on or what our idea here is. So it's, we're going to restore and transform an iconic open space. It's already iconic. We want to make it better. Into a world-class destination. I've gotten people that ask, what does that mean, world-class? We'll talk about that in a minute. Based on the region's natural environment, culture, and commitment to quality of life for all. That's a big deal to make sure that, this project's for everyone. That means you can't have it overrun with people because then we would ruin it and damage it. But if we're going to make improvements, we want to make sure that people use it in appropriate ways. So, Susan Turner did a lot of research for us early in the project. She's right here in the front row. And it was very helpful for us to get our heads around not only the history of the lakes, but the history of the problems of the lakes. I think that's the most important takeaway. So this is 1929. That's City Park Lake. You can see May Street kind of at the bottom there. And that is a dam, and it's still a dam even today. What's happened there is, let me find my little pointer here. Here we go. Yeah, so that's where the May Street Bridge is. There's like a little park that sits here now. But they just came in and they filled this, cut down a bunch of trees. They built a little dam. Bayou de Plancher comes in, and we have a lake, right? Well, almost immediately afterwards, there were fish kills, there were algae blooms. Invasive species started to take over the lakes. They had to do things. All those beautiful cypress trees started to die. There was erosion from day one. And the result, or the reason why, is because these lakes were never really designed, right? Not in a robust way. It was just a dam, a make-work project, and then they kind of moved on, right? And they've been beautiful. I mean, they function very well when you consider the kind of the limited amount of thought that really went into designing them. And I think that's the opportunity before us today, is to think about design and how we actually design a place that really functions for all the things that people want to do there. Running, right? That's a pretty simple thing. It's not hard to design for running around the lake. I just need a road and some paving. But it doesn't really work that well because people are running on a road and there's traffic and there's not crossings for them to get across traffic. So just like a simple little thing like that, a lot of design thinking could go into making it much better. So that's really what we're trying to do with this project more than anything. So there's a sort of a tipping point here. If you look at Campus Lake, it's starting to fill in. You can see what used to be, actually when I was at LSU, a big lake, has already turned into, it's like half full of willow trees and other sorts of things that are starting to fill in. Behind the Acacia House, that's where I lived for a while. Sadly, it's gone. They kicked them off campus. But behind it, that area is starting to fill in little by little by little with reeds and all sorts of things, right? So that's just going to happen. It'll continue to happen. The lake's getting more and more shallow. As it gets more shallow, it gets more warm. It gets hotter, warmer. There's more algae blooms. There's more fish kills. Fewer birds want to come back and use it. So again, it's an opportunity now to go from the thing on the left potentially to the thing on the right. So we've gone through a lot of public engagement processes in this project. We've had a bunch of public meetings, but ancillary to public meetings, there's been other sort of things that have gone on. So there's a whole public engagement protocol that we've put together to make sure that, yeah, people in this room are engaged, but also people that won't come to a public meeting or can't come to a public meeting, to make sure that they participate or have a voice within the project. CPEX, who's one of the consultants, is working on the project. They've done a fantastic job of going out to just make sure that people are engaged and that they are educated about the project and the opportunities here. So, people that live close to the lakes, you have, this very vested interest, and you guys are showing up and you're being very vocal. But people that live further away, right, they need to understand this thing as well. So they've been able to come out, they write comments, we collect all those comments, they go to events, any kind of event that's going on around town to make sure that people are educated and know about what's going on. Some of the key themes that have come out of it. So, there's the idea that it's a recreational epicenter. There's sort of the bike and pedestrian path that goes around the entire lake. People love that idea. Nature preserve, water quality. These are all themes that we hear over and over again as we ask people about the project. So the key themes that we have taken out of all this and tried to kind of put them together into things that we want to do, right? These are sort of actions that we're getting into. So one is this idea of a world-class destination, right? And people have said, well, world-class, gosh, I don't think I want that, Well, this is Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Why would you not want that, right? We're a capital, a great capital in the United States, and it's a place that people do travel to from around the world. We don't want to be overrun like Disney World, but when people do come here, they should go away saying, wow, that's a world-class place. I didn't realize it. I should go back sometime, right? Birding tourism is something that we've really, that's clearly something that's happening here. This is a kind of tourism that's like very low impact. It's not like it's throngs of people coming, and it's very seasonal. People come and look at birds, study them at certain times of the year. They stay in hotels, they eat in restaurants. All sorts of things spin off of having a place that people come and view birds. Improve water quality is another big one. And lots of things happen when you improve the water quality, right? You can take your kid fishing and he might actually catch a fish, right? Every time he goes. That would be pretty cool. But other things, university students, high school students can participate in going out and measuring the water to understand, what's in it, what used to be in it, what's in it now, all these sort of things. And you can start to think about different sort of ecologies that might take advantage of this improved water quality. And then communities take advantage of it too. Right? So we want people to come, or people that live here, to go out and walk around the lakes and not be always thinking about, oh, that water's so disgusting. We want them to go and walk around and think, this place is wonderful. I want to get on a canoe. I want to get on a paddleboard, and I'm not concerned about it anymore. I want to catch a fish and eat the fish that comes out of the lake, right? So all those things are great, but it's not just recreation of running and biking. If it's a place where you can come and just meet your neighbors, that's a pretty cool thing too, right? That creates a much more healthy community. People feel safe and secure when you do that. So it's not all sunshine and roses. You just kind of go out. We don't want to do what has been done before. There are key challenges that we have to get into and try to understand how we're going to approach them. So the first thing we do is we go out and we wander all over the site and we look at it and try to figure out where are the places that are, degraded the most? Where are the places where there's habitat that's been lost? And then where are the opportunities as well? So maps like this start to look at kind of putting all that stuff together on one single map. The other big challenge we have is the depth of the water in the lakes. And this is like number one issue that's now starting to create this tipping point within the lakes. They're very shallow. Shallow water gets hot. You know, in South Louisiana, hot water creates algae blooms and just all sorts of things start to happen. So a very simple thing we can do is just deepen the water. That's a huge step in the right direction because that takes care of a lot of different problems. Now, underneath that water, there's a lot of stumps, right? Is that an opportunity or a problem? It's maybe a little bit of both. I like the idea that, you know, we can do things with the stumps. We can make kids' play areas out of stumps. We can use stumps to create certain types of habitat. If you look out into the lakes now, wherever there's a log or something, turtles are on it. There's not enough of that. There could be a lot more of that kind of habitat within the lake. So if we think about using some of these structures to do that, that would be very beneficial. This is probably the most important diagram that we put together and stumbled upon in doing this project, and it's the implied ownership diagram. So we know who generally owns, there's a couple of spots we're not sure, but we know who owns most of the water, most of the lakes. And it's hard to think, well, someone owns a lake? Well, yeah, actually the university owns University Lake, and you guys own, well, I guess by default, you own the University Lake too. But you guys own City Park Lake. It's owned by BREC, which is a city institution, of course. But it goes beyond that, just who owns it, right? It's implied ownership is really, I think, the secret to this project. There are areas that seem like they are very private, right? And that's against these residential areas. And so if we try to do things in those areas that don't respect that, it's going to be a failure, right? And nobody wants to go down that road. But then there's other areas that feel much more public. This zone has beautiful houses along it, along Dalrymple, but it is a major roadway. It's a major gateway to the university into Baton Rouge. So that feels much more public, and that gives you an opportunity to do certain public things there. This zone down here along Wampold Park and this sort of entrance into LSU, again, that feels very public. So that opens up different types of opportunities for those locations than you would have here. And then there's this zone here in kind of pink that really feels like it's part of the university, right? So it's kind of public, it's kind of private, it's got just these institutional and traditions that are kind of wrapped up within it. The other interesting thing about the university, though, is that right now there's not a real obvious day-to-day window on the lakes from the university, right? If you live in a sorority house, sure, you see it and you're interacting with it every day. If you come to Lod Cook for some event, you see it. But day to day, most students don't really engage with it very much, not in an obvious way. And I think there's a huge opportunity there that we're looking at. So, okay. So before we get into really looking at the plan and all the components that are in it, we're going to look at the systems that are behind the plan. And so these are all things that are kind of work across the whole plan. And they're things that you have to deal with in a systematic way. If you just try to do them piecemeal, piece by piece, it doesn't really add up to a robust project. So water quality is the first one, and that's the biggest, most important one. You guys have told us that over and over again. So a diagram like this starts to look at where is water coming into the system and where are the biggest problems with water. And generally, if there's a problem, it's just because water's coming into the system. That's pretty much it. Baton Rouge is in a or this lake system is in a very mature watershed. It's generally homes and businesses and things. We're not talking about dirty industries and things that are within this watershed. So you're talking about things that just happen, you know, in your front yard, right? So that's the kind of stuff that comes into the water. If you fertilize your lawn, that comes into the lakes, right? If you pour grease down a catch basin, that comes into the lakes. Those are the kind of things that we need to think about, and that's the kind of stuff that we start to program out and understand where do they enter, because that's going to tell us what we have to do to clean the water. So then we come to this diagram that takes that system and start to say, what are the major things that we're doing to approach cleansing the water? So some of it, and we'll get into more detail in some areas, but there's some engineering things that we're looking at up top here. This kind of green ribbon that goes around, that's looking at using a sort of a wetland treatment system. So as water rolls off of lawns, off of roads into the lake, we capture it, you run it through a little sort of wetland piece, sort of like little bioswale. Can have irises and things in it, reeds, whatnot, fish even, and birds eating those fish. But that contact time of taking water, giving it contact with soils and plant material, it takes out a lot of the nutrients that are going into the lake and feeding algae, right? So that's That's really our number one job. Take nutrients out so that algae and things like that don't continue to bloom. But there's other things where we're looking at other ways of dealing with some of the larger outfalls. And in other places where we're looking at just how the water circulates and moves through the system. Right now there's a dam between the two lakes. We're looking at removing that, and we'll talk about that in more detail. That changes the hydrology also. So these are the three things that we're primarily dealing with when it comes to cleaning water. So the first one, floatables, that's probably, everybody looks at that, that's disgusting, right? I see all this dirty garbage and stuff. That's the easiest thing to fix, actually. They float. You can scoop them out. When wind pushes them in one direction, if you have traps there to collect it, you can get rid of it. You need to think about upstream issues, but generally that's the easiest thing. The second one are sediments. If you just, wherever you had a catch basin, if you could, or a inlet into the lake, if you could just build a little basin there, let the water kind of sit and hang out for a little while, most of the sediment falls out. Every now and then you come out and you scoop out the sediment. It takes time. It's a little bit more complicated, but not a huge thing. The nutrients, that's the one that's the real problem. That's where it's generally fertilizer, it's phosphorus, it's nitrogen, it's stuff like that, that just feeds this beast inside the lake, which is, algae, and that sucks up then all the oxygen. So those are the major things that we're trying to work with. So this is a technique that we will be using where water comes into the lakes. We want to build a basin. In a lot of cases, that basin may exist already. We're just kind of reshaping it. And then that basin is lined with wetland plants, right? So contact with wetlands and soils and things absorbs all those nutrients. Then when they make it into the proper areas of the lake, a lot of that stuff is gone, and that problem is then reduced. If we do this correctly, those sort of basins can actually collect some of the floatables that may come in. They can also collect some of the sediments that come in. But the main thing is really trying to think about that nutrients. The other thing that we're looking at is then along the edges of the lakes, we want to have where water, comes off of, I don't know, maybe a lawn or something. If I have this bioswale that can capture that water and then let it sort of run along there and eventually find its way back into the lake. Again, I've had a lot of contact there, so it's reduced the nutrient loads on that water. And that's very beneficial to the lake. And those things can be very beautiful, right? These things need to look like wetlands, they need to be attractive to wildlife, they create habitat, biodiversity, all the sort of things that we're talking about of trying to create this world-class place in the city. All these things add up to doing that. Okay, so there's some engineering stuff that we're gonna do as well. So some of these things they sound complicated, but it's just kind of dumb pipes and gravity that make it work. Our goal is to make sure that when we install these things, they look beautiful. They're not just left to the engineers. The engineers will make it work great. Our goal here is also to make it look beautiful. But what we're gonna do, what's happening right now is Bayou de Plancher, not Black Bayou, comes into City Park Lake at the north, and it exits way down south here at the bottom of University Lake, and it goes back into Bayou de Plancher. So historically, that water just came through. It's set in this swamp, and did all kinds of things, and just kind of found its way through. Well, what happens now is that upstream, all these fertilizers and sediment and stuff that comes into the system finds its way right in there to City Park Lake. So what we're going to do, well, when it rains, right, so the first flush of rain, that first 1 inch, if you get a 4-inch rain, that first 1 inch, that's where all the junk is. And that's the stuff that you really just want to keep out of the lake system. So the idea is to take it, capture it here, and route it through to Corporation Canal, which is really Bayou de Plancher, and it all ends up in the same place that it would end up anyway. But it takes it out of City Park by rerouting it around it. That way then City Park Lake becomes much better. And the ecological systems south of University Lake, they're already set up just naturally to accommodate those nutrients so that they are naturally released into the environment or used by the plants that are down there. So from there, it goes through a little bit of a treatment wetland in the green box. It gets then put into a pipe. It goes into this concrete-lined canal, which is, and it's even underground through big stretches, finds its way through the university and exits there. I'll show you where it exits later. That, we think, takes care of like 30% of the nutrient loading that's coming into the lakes. So that's a huge win just by doing this one little environmental engineering piece. So these are kind of the percentages that we're dealing with as far as the things that we're trying to do to clean water and the amount of effect that you basically get with them. So by doing that bypass, we're getting about 25% of increase in the in water quality. By deepening the lake, making it cooler and other sort of things happen, about a 20% increase. The riparian edges and the wetlands that we're creating, that puts a lot of shade on the water, but it also cleanses the water. That's about a 15%. And then beyond the scope of this project, and this is things that we're starting to look to decide how best to look at, but these things start to be policy components, right? But it's looking at the watershed that's upstream and saying, okay, if you have a lawn up there, can we educate people maybe to fertilize less often? Can we convince people to convert some of their lawns maybe to a meadow or something and keep just the important lawns that they really use a lot? It's also when the city builds a new road or upgrades a storm sewer system that they put in bioswales and rain gardens and things like that to clean that water way, way upstream long before it ever gets to the lake. So these things add up to a huge increase in the quality of the water here. So this is just a reminder of the systems that we're dealing with. So, you know, if you're up on Government Street, and I don't know if you have a business or something and you pour oil or something down the drain, you probably never think about the fact that that actually ends up in this lake system. So if we could go upstream and put little markers on manhole covers and things just to say, hey, remember where this water goes, that changes how people think. And that's a very simple and inexpensive thing to do. There's other places that are, you know, very residential where we have this is going to be lots of lawns and things that are flowing into the lakes. At the university, a lot of parking lots and things like that. So again, we want to figure out how to capture that water and process it before it gets there. So it's basically best management, right? These things are not new. This is not anything unique that we have to do here. This is stuff that's happening in communities across the country where they are interested in cleaning this up. So, you know, converting lawns or even just rethinking fertilizer is a huge deal. Thinking about the kind of drainage systems, there is drainage technology that you can put in place that has these cartridges that start to clean the water to some degree. They take a lot of maintenance and that sort of thing. Biofiltration, wherever we can do it. And again, wherever there's automobiles and there's surface runoff, pavement, let's think about biofiltration to slow down and clean that water. Education, though, is really at the end game, right? If we can educate people, they know where the water's going, they will change their practices. We see it time and time again across the country. So after we started to deal with water quality, then dredging and excavation is the next step. So this map shows basically what we're doing with the soil that we're removing. So there's soil that will be coming out of the sort of dark areas and being pushed to the sort of the light blue areas and the green areas, right? So the green areas become land, the bluish areas become wetland shelves and things like that, other types of ecological spaces, adding to habitat quality, biodiversity, places for birds and fish to hang out and do their thing. Over here, you can kind of see some of the little sections that show how that works. You know, if there's places where we're just expanding the shoreline or places where you're putting in the wetland shelves. We have a variety of approaches that we're using. So existing conditions, this is what we have right now. There's the, you know, there's conflicts with cars and pedestrians up here. There's conflicts with, you know, how birds and fish, you know, are having to use this water that's really not very clean or very pure. And if we go all the way, the goal is to take that and make it into something like this. We're not doing this everywhere, but the key components are that there are wetland shelves, there may be islands in a few places, there's shade on the water, there's deep water, there's shallow water, views are maintained for residents, and then we try to do what we can to minimize conflicts with pedestrians. Winds, we have to go in and study where does the wind come from. Erosion is a huge problem right now in the lakes. There's plenty of places where the lake bank was maybe 20 feet further out historically than it is now. What happens where you have that is that there's little microwaves that are built that build up as the wind pushes across, and that starts to create erosion like this. And if you really go out with a critical eye and start looking at the edges of the lakes, they are highly eroded. That is happening everywhere. And what happens is that at first, you know, it's kind of a low bank like this, and there's a little bit of erosion. But as the bank gets steeper and steeper and steeper because of erosion, it actually intensifies, gets stronger and stronger and stronger. If you look right out front, in front of the building here, you can see where the sidewalk is getting close to wanting to come in, fall into the lake. These are little things that add up to big things over time. The other thing we're looking at is, there's different types of banks. There's banks that are high, and there's banks that are low, but also how much fill we can accommodate in different areas. So if the bank is low and I'm trying to push out at a 5-to-1 slope, I can only go so far, right? If the bank is very high, I can go a bit further. So you start to get this sort of thing. But the goal is always trying to maintain, views where appropriate, so that if you push out the bank, you still see open water. You don't actually see the edge there. So ecology is the next big thing we're looking at. So we have an ecologist on our team. They go out and they look at things, and they just look at things from the ecological microscope. They're not interested in people. They think everybody should change their lawn to a meadow, and there should be, I don't know, hawks living in our rafters or something, or skunks would probably be fine. We have to take all this stuff, we put it, and try to decide which items are the most appropriate to use and which ones are just wishful thinking, but great ideas, right? So that's where we are now. So the next step with you take all this information and then you start to create these diagrams about what kind of ecological functions and habitats are we going to create in which locations around the lakes. And so, there's a lot of colors here that represent a lot of different types of ecosystems. The main thing is that we just want it to be more robust. We want more variety. We want more edges between different types of ecologies. That's what animals like. That's what insects like that the animals eat and the birds are attracted to. That's the goal with ecology. And it's turning up the volume on each one of these types of places. Okay, circulation, that's a huge one. These are the big conflicts. This is the danger that's happening around the lakes. There's a lot of places I just you don't want to run, but people are out there running because it's the only kind of opportunity and because the setting is so nice. So what we've done here is we've gone in and looked at what kind of additional circulation we need to upgrade so that all these things work much better. So there's a lot of very fine-grained detail. I think the main elements are that we're planning on a multi-use path, so this is for recreational bicycling, and people with strollers and people walking and people running on a recreation trail that goes all the way around the lakes, and so that it's as unimpeded by conflict as possible. There are a few places that we're still trying to work out some of the details, but in general, we're very close to getting there. You add to that then sort of finer grained paths. These are just little pathways within parks and open spaces where you can just sort of hang out, wander around. You're not as in the way if you just sort of want to sit and hang out as maybe if there's bicycles moving by. There's also places for people that want to commute or go faster on bicycles. We don't want to mix those people with pedestrians, so we want to make sure that there's a special place for them within the fabric of the project. And then cars, they're not going to go away, but the big goals here are looking at, in pink, the idea of making one-way streets where appropriate. That's going to reduce conflicts, cut down the amount of traffic that drives through residential neighborhoods that really don't want a bunch of traffic going through them. It will then reduce conflicts between people that are walking, riding bikes, and all these sort of things that are happening. And then the yellow, those are areas where we're looking at enhanced pedestrian crossings. It may be just changing the way an intersection works so that it's easy to get people and cars through those intersections. A lot of them were built in the 1950s probably, and if you notice, you always get a free right turn. You never have to stop. So that was at some past time when everyone thought we would never walk again, right? We'd all just drive around in cars. And that never really happened. We continued to walk. So those kind of interchanges need to be rethought so that there actually is a time when pedestrians have the right of way and they can get through without any conflict. So kind of good, better, best, that we sort of look at these problems from that approach. So, good, let's just get a multi-use trail off to the side. Better would be if we could separate bicycles off of it, and maybe we put them on the road. And I think the best is if you make that road one way. It's much more predictable. It just reduces all kinds of conflicts. Lighting is another one, and we continue to study this. But with lighting, what we're trying to do is understand frequency, the amount of light that needs to happen in different areas. And this is really about where you want to drive people to use in the evening. So if there's a place that should be used in the evening, you want to light it in an appropriate way. If it's a place that you don't really want people to use in the evening, then you have a question before you, do I just not light it so they don't go there? Or am I setting up an unsafe situation where they're going to use it anyway, and then now it's not lit, and that creates a problem? So these are some of the things that, sort of fine points that we're working through in the plan right now. But generally, we think we want things to be lit in an appropriate way. We're talking about low levels of lighting wherever possible. So, if there's boardwalks and things, we don't want lots of glare. If we're trying to make this place that's very bird-friendly, having lots of lights is a bad idea. This is actually a bad example right here of something we don't want to do. This is a light fixture you see a lot, and actually the light is here, and it focuses up, and then it's supposed to reflect back down. The reality is a lot of the lights escapes into the skies, and birds don't like that, and that's just not a good situation. So wherever possible, there will be some lights that are higher, but they won't be focused up. Wherever possible, we want cutoffs and switches that push the light down. And also dim it appropriately so that they come on at the right times and go off at the right times. So this is a little sketch that shows, what an upgraded maybe East Lakeshore Drive might look like with lighting and a bicycle route here, pedestrians down there, and a very, very low level of lighting, maybe 1-foot candle through there. Okay, so this is the main event, right? You guys want to know what the master plan looks like. What is all this stuff? So we have, I think last time we looked at lots of diagrams that just sort of said what goes where. So this time we actually got into an illustrative plan that starts to really illustrate what these areas look like, how big are they, how small are they, how do they connect, interact with one another. The major pieces, so I'm going to walk you through just kind of the components quickly, and then we'll come back and go through each one in detail in a moment. But basically up top, it's City Park Lake, so the City Park here. This is where that control structure was I was telling you about. The idea of maybe a boathouse of some sort where you could rent little pedal boats or rowboats. Very family friendly. A promenade idea, it's very natural, lots of gardens and things that might follow Dalrymple and start to be kind of a gateway into the university. A new kind of park here. A lot of the parks right now are really very much focused on young adults. So if you have a young family, there's not really things for you to do around the campus lakes. So this would be a location where that would happen. A lot of ecology behind the churches and the fraternity houses here. An idea of a birding center. In front of Lod Cook, right out front here, the idea of a big event lawn that can be used for certain types of big events, but generally just kind of campus life experience. In front of the sorority houses is this big promenade. Again, very flexible kind of space where people can go out, students can sort of put a new front door of the university on the lakes. Around the corner, a boathouse. And so this is an extension of the university's recreation center. So if you want to rent a boat or take a sailboat out, or maybe there's even classes of things that you take. If the university gets a crew team, which we'll talk about later, or they have one now, but if it becomes more robust, this would be the place that they would store their boats and things. Wampold Park, an expanded Wampold Park. So it picks up on the spirit of the things that are happening there already and just improves upon that. And then on the east side, lots of nature, lots of trying to work with the forms and the habitat and the things that are there already. But most importantly, adding a pedestrian pathway that gets people out of your front yards and onto a multi-use trail. So let's look at these things in detail. So this is at the north. This is the City Park Golf Course right here. So the key to this spot is that we have this new museum, the Knock Knock Children's Museum. There is a vastly upgraded city park, which is looking really great. But the city park is not really on City Park Lake, right? It's across a road. So the idea is to upgrade this interchange so that we get a much better pedestrianized crossing there. To create this boathouse experience that's right here, and that's for renting boats. If you've been to Central Park, there's a great experience. You can get on a rowboat and take your family out or friends, whatever. There's some parking that's required to accommodate that. We're studying exactly how much parking we need and where exactly it goes, but it's going to be within this vicinity. And those start to be the pieces that create this zone. So existing conditions, right? So there's parking there already. It's not exactly beautiful. There's a really great bike trail that just kind of ends, in the back of a truck. Guys fishing, I don't know if they catch anything or not. They're trying. Lots of erosion. And ducks don't help. Like they're constantly like nibbling at the edges, just like, chewing away at this stuff. And then you can see some of the pedestrian bicycle conflicts that happen within this zone. So what are we proposing? So the idea is that, and we have not designed buildings and facilities yet. That's, there'll be some details of that. A lot of that, though, happens when we get into the amenities phase. But the idea is that it's a pier that's very simple, right? There's a little bit of architectural shade canopy maybe on the edge. You can wait for your boat or just sort of hang out there. If we need a place, a kiosk where you can get your tickets and pay your money to do the thing, it's something that's very simple, beautiful, artful. It's not trying to call attention to itself in some big way. And, there's rowboats, and of course, there's pelican boats. We would do tiger boats, but I don't think they don't swim, do they? I don't know. You guys from Relish? Yeah. They do? Okay, done. All right. Okay, so we'll do tiger boats too. The word is they do swim. But anyway, that's it's just this really cool, simple little experience that draws people to the lakes. And you know what? If people go out and they use them, they'll want to take care of them. And if there's ever like a bond measure that, should we fund, a new cleanup of the lakes or something, or add this component, people will vote yes, because they love these things so much and they get to use them, right, in new and unexpected ways. Parking, right? This is a huge question. Oh my gosh, parking. This is going to be a Walmart. So I keep saying, I keep saying this over and over again. We're putting the park back in parking. Okay, right. I'm off my game tonight, man. I was trying to anyway. All right. Okay. So, but parking can be beautiful. There could be really great shade trees. There could be beautiful hedges that are clipped and manicured so you don't see the parking cars from anywhere. And actually, when you get to the parking lot, you feel like you're at the park already, and this is really nice. Right? And if it's parking that's only used occasionally, a day or two a week, we can start to look at, is there sort of grass paving that we can use in those areas? There's lots of things that we can do to make the parking much more appropriate to a park-like setting, and that's job one here. So if we move down now off to the edge, so this is Dalrymple. If you're exiting the interstate, you get there's a interchange. And so at this point, this is where that control structure comes into a wetland system, right? So at first, we're giving all that water contact with wetlands. It's soaking up nutrients. And then at the end of it, it'll go into a pipe and magically disappear. We'll never have to worry about it again. So the way this thing works, or let's look at what's there now, right? Okay, so this is at City Park Lake, or this is at City Park, right? This is where that control structure would happen. This looks like, I don't know, there's some oil infrastructure that never got taken out from, I don't know, some oil spill or something, just sheet pile. We want to take that out, clean all this stuff up so it looks like a park-like setting, right? Here we see some of the conflicts that happen within those areas. There's a big hill where the interchange, the I-10 interchange is, and then you see all this erosion. So we're going to look at a couple of illustrations in just a moment that are within this zone right here. So here it is. So this is Dalrymple back here. This would be the slope up to the I-10 interchange. And this is a big wetland system, right? That's taking all that water. It's flowing through there. It's beautiful. It's doing work, right? It's not just a landscape that's pretty. It's got a job to do. There's some boardwalks. There's this multi-use trail. And whoever drew this in my office clearly knew there'd be lots of birds there too, right? So it's a beautiful place, and it does a job. It might start to look like this if you're within it, right? So you see the lake out here. We've introduced maybe some cypress trees to kind of screen the interstate highway. There's the idea of a sort of glass-type sound wall system up there, so views are maintained. We're doing research on that to make sure that they are appropriate with birds. We don't want to do something that's going to be a problem. And we're trying to look at ideas of what to do with the bridge. It's a steel bridge. That's why it's loud. That's part of why it's loud. And there's certain things we could do with baffles and insulation that we're looking at to change the acoustic dynamics of that space. And the idea is that, yes, we're going to have boardwalks and wetlands and kids doing stuff that they can't do right now. But it's not all that. There needs to be places that are like a garden and places that are very respectful of the cultural history. These great big oak trees that are really part of the identity of this area of the campus. And so those things are very much a part of these design ideas. This might be a view of it, a different one. So these people are on a multi-use trail. It'd probably be a little wider. This trail would actually be about 12 feet wide, but you start to get the basic idea of sort of wetlands and people and the roads that are back there and how all these things work. So as you come further south now, so now we're crossing underneath I-10 and down to this zone. And this is envisioned as this sort of very soft, curvaceous kind of promenade that moves through there. There's a lot of nature, but it's gardens as well. So if you look at what's existing, right, so here's the I-10, this is the exit off of it. Again, very bad sort of pedestrian space. We are looking at opportunities for getting from Polk Park, which is sort of hidden back behind here, down onto this zone and then across, and looking at how an a connection can work there, pedestrian crossing. These trees need to be maintained, of course. All this kind of erosion and things that are happening, we'll start to look at how to clean that up. And then we're looking at places, where there are pedestrians too close to the roads and how to move those around. So this is a rendering that starts to show some of those components and how that might work. So in this one, it's less focused on nature. There's plenty of nature there, but variety is, the spice of life here. So we want areas that are just beautiful lawns that people can hang out. There can be trees that are, crepe myrtles. Everything doesn't have to be nature or native, but then there'll be lots of groves of, cypress trees and things, big live oaks, a multi-use path that moves through here, and then maybe a very slow moving path right along the water's edge. Places where you could get right to the water and there's no wetland stuff, you can fish. Kids can, throw stuff in the water. They love skipping stones and doing things like that. So we want places you can do that. So this might be a rendering of what that looks like. You see I-10 in the background, and you see this sort of layers of trails and activity areas. Very comfortable, very beautiful. And these are the kind of places that we envision. So there's gardens, there can be beautiful trees with displays of flowers, but there needs to be areas that are natural as well. Some areas where the water comes right up to the edge and people can just hang out on the grass and enjoy the day. And maybe little small areas where certain events can happen during the day. We're going to talk about crew races. There, you can even have, once fishing is much better here, you can even have fishing tournaments here. You can do that one day a year. That would be a fun event for the city. Okay, so as you get to the end of that idea then kind of basically ends, I guess, a new end to City Park. Basically, City Park is now coming all the way down to this little park here now. And this idea is that this is much more of a family-focused park. You can easily walk from one end to the other. These little purple things are gardens and whatnot. There's parking, absolutely. And again, like I said, we're still studying how much parking we need and how we're going to be dealing with that, but it's not going to be intrusive. And then there's places that are big lawns and places for kids to hang out and do stuff. So this is some of the things that are there now. There's a bit of a little pier there. This is the parking lot that exists in that park that's there right now. And that park, was built the last time that the lakes were dredged in the 80s. There was nothing there originally. That thing was added onto, but it was never fully programmed. So the idea now is let's figure out what to do with it. Let's design for this thing. And then, places where there's trails and walkways, garbage cans, all these sort of things need to be programmed into the project. So here it's about families, right? And so the idea is that, look, we want play equipment and things, but it doesn't need to be traditional swings and big colorful pipes and stuff like that. It can be a different kind of thing. We're going to pull stumps and logs out of this lake like crazy. Let's make really cool play stuff that kids can just get inventive and come up with their own idea of what to do with these little spaces that we make. We can make bird nests for them, right? They love sitting and things like that. There could be a place like at the Luxembourg Gardens in Paris, right, where you can have a guy with a couple little boats on a stand, and you can rent a boat for 50 cents or a quarter, and then kind of push it around in the lake right there in this sort of little shallow basin that we've created. I don't know if we're going to encourage kids to get in the lake, but you can certainly do it from the edges, and I think it'd be a lot of fun. And then just different ways that they can just hang out, and families can have picnics and do different kinds of things in a very relaxed way, but not in a highly structured way. Okay, so now the next piece, so this is May Street that moves through here. So May Street's been realigned. It still ends in exactly the same place it currently does. So this is the existing May Street that comes through here. But the idea was to try to pull it back a little bit, and I'll show you some diagrams in a minute about why this bridge is where it is. But basically what we're trying to do here is that we want to hydraulically connect the two lakes. Right now, there's water that comes into City Park, and it kind of hangs out there, and it starts to stagnate and do certain things in that lake. We want to start to figure out how to get some of that water quickly into University Lake, so there's more mixing, more dilution of some of the issues that we have. We want fishermen to be able to get from one lake to the other very easily. If people are renting paddle boats, or if people are on stand-up kayaks and paddle boards, We should be able to get them from one lake to the other very easily. But I think the other big piece is that we're interested, and LSU is interested in, well, let's look at the pictures of it first. So this is that existing bridge, right? So again, lots of erosion that you can see here. It's pretty inconsequential. Underneath it is a weir. You see a lot of guys that hang out here fishing, and that's because the water is aerated right there. It's one of the few places where you can actually fish really like that, right? I can breathe right here, and then we catch them. Anyway. So, but crew, that's the big thing that this bridge also allows us to do. So this sort of light green mark, so that's a Olympic crew course. It's 2,000 meters. That's really what you need. If you go to Cambridge or in Boston and you see these big races, that's what they have. That's what they're doing. Now, there's a shorter course that's 1,000 meters, and that's important as well. We'll be able to do this much better because the guys will no longer be hitting stumps and a big giant sewer pipe that's in the middle of the lake. But by aligning this road just right, the span, is minimized. We're able to get, I think it's five boats in a race underneath it. And it makes a pretty neat hydrologic connection, but also a pretty neat cultural connection. And then there's certain types of events at Baton Rouge that the university, but I think the city as well, can take advantage of that would happen if we made this a reality. So what is a bridge? It doesn't need to be something that it has to be a giant suspension bridge or something. We want it to be very beautiful and elegant and simple. It needs to have lots of pedestrian space on top of it so people can come and go and get across it. Some simple materials. This is precast concrete that's been very lovingly detailed. It's got some lighting on it, but it's very simple, and it's no taller and higher than it has to be. This is the kind of thing that we're interested in doing. Okay, so now if we jump down to how are we doing here? All right. If we jump down to this area behind the fraternity houses, and so here we go. Here's Lod Cook right here, so we're all right in there. So there's already a lot of nature that's just kind of volunteering and happening right there. The lakes are getting very shallow very rapidly in this location. So the idea is to look at just building upon, okay, this is a hydrologic and natural system that's happening already. How do we build upon that? So the goal is to create, if you go back to earlier in the thing, we talked about birding as an opportunity, right? We want to attract people to come here and see that and then talk about Baton Rouge as such a great place, right? So this would be a sort of an idea of a new birding center that would happen there. It could have a strong focus on some of the museum elements that the university has and trying to expose those to the public and put them here. Or it could just be a very simple pavilion. It's a place you can, pick up some binoculars, or there's bird blinds and some boardwalks that you can go out and just sort of take in the bird and the wildlife. And then it's complementary to the wildlife preserve or reserve on the other side, which we don't want to put people in. This is much more about just birds, right? There's little islands that you can see that have been built so that birds can roost there as well as nest. But so this side's for people. They can take advantage of that, and then that side is for birds. So this is what's happening right there. So you can see these areas that are starting to fill in little by little over time. A lot of it is really filled in. And it's gone out, maybe 30 feet now from the bank from what it used to be. This might be a section. So maybe this is that bird facility or a bird blind or something. You can get into it. You can see the birds, but they can't see you. Some walkways and things. It'd be managed so that people want to come here at different times of the year. There'd be informational, interpretive signage for people. So all kinds of things that you can start to build upon a facility like this. So it might look like this. So you have sort of wetland areas. There's places with shade trees. There's lots of big boardwalks that are kind of moving out there. And then blinds and things that might happen out on the edges. And so architecturally, right, there's a building there. What is that thing? We haven't designed a building yet, but we need to start thinking about the character of it. So, it could be something that's very regionally focused. It's a sort of real simple pier and beam. A lot of structures in South Louisiana are built that way. Just big ceiling fans to kind of move the air around a little bit. Very simple, right? Bird blinds could start to be things like this. They might float or they might not. I think people kind of like to get on platforms that float. It kind of feels a little bit, just feels different. You can do pavilions that are a little bigger that maybe sit on the water in some fashion. And maybe you look at things that are much more contemporary, but use very natural kinds of materials, so they're very earthy, but they kind of call attention to themselves in a unique way. And it's all about this kind of stuff, places to hang out and do these kinds of things. So in front of Lod Cook, if you walk out in front here, there's a little pavilion or just a little overlook, right? So the idea is to kind of expand upon that, expand upon the idea that this is already kind of a public center on the campus. There's lots of, the lab school is back here. There's fraternities and things up here. Sororities are just below here. But the idea that there could be some sort of an event space, a very, very flexible event space that can accommodate lots of different types of things, depending on how the university wants to use it. It really becomes that window on the lakes that I think the university needs. And it starts to be the kind of place, it could have a very small pavilion. You could use it for lots of different types of activities. So here's the existing one. You can see all that erosion where the trail is starting to kind of fall into the edge there. Volunteer plants that have kind of grown up in a haphazard way along the edges. So it might be just something like this, really simple. It's a lawn, it slopes down to the lake. Maybe there's some sort of little pavilion at the end. Maybe there's sort of a little walkway. People like to get down to the edges of things. You can throw a Frisbee. If the university is having an event, it could be something like this one day, and then back to the other thing the next day. There could be certain game day things that are maybe programmed into it. If the university wants to have a small concert, right, just to show off, the work of some of the students, that'd be a great place to do it. You could fly a kite. If you wanted to rent it for weddings, you could probably fill it 4 times a day, every weekend throughout the year. I don't know if that's a thing that we want to do, but these are just things that are on the table. And then in front of Sorority Row, and remember now there are fraternity houses that are mixed in there as well. The idea is now even sort of more campus life experience there. Maybe less formalized as this thing is. This is much more informal. You kind of go out, figure out what you want to do with that space. A lot of tradition that could be wrapped up in how it operates. But it's really trying to solve these problems, right? There's like Halloween where there's a huge event that goes on, throngs of people. You've got conflicts with buses and cars and pedestrians. This sidewalk is not wide enough, the little rolled curb. Again, keep talking about erosion. These telephone poles are just about to fall in. So it might be something like this, right? So here's the existing roadway up here. Remember, the water is like right next to the edge of that. If we push it out a little bit, you start to create these lawns, and kids can come out and invent whatever they want to do with it. It's a hard edge, so you could put boats in very easily if you wanted to. You can just kind of come down, hang out on these steps, and hopefully study, whatever. And so that might be a section that cuts through it. You have this lawn sloping down, a promenade, some steps down to the water, big shade trees and things, and then all the kind of traditional things that are tied up with fraternities and sororities against the edge here. And it's this sort of thing. If we have crew races, that's the ultimate place to watch them, right? It's a long linear space. You can imagine 2 days out of the year, there's bleachers that are set up and people are hanging out and watching this thing. It'd be a blast. But I think it's really, most importantly, it's about this and this kind of thing. It's just hang out day after day. Okay, so as we come around the corner, so this is sort of the edge, the end of the fraternity houses. There's Campus Lake, College Lake is here, LSU's Recreation Center is there. So the idea here is look at, are there opportunities for taking the recreation center and kind of putting it out on the lake? So that there's different types of opportunities for students, different things for them to do. So the idea is a boathouse here. So if there's crew, this is where the crew house is. They keep their equipment there. This is where they meet. There is a facility of some sort that could be a small cafe. It could be a place that college students pick up paddle boards, where they pick up a canoe or a kayak or a sunfish, right? They have their card, they can check it out. So it's sort of very much an extension of this. There's lots of questions we still have with the university about, operationally how it works, but there's definitely interest in this new improved way of dealing with recreation. There's some parking that would be accommodated there, but I think most importantly, it's very well connected to Wampold Park with a really simple pathway, a very simple little bridge that just connects things together in a very nice way. Wampold Park, it's a lot of university students are using it, lots of young adults are using it. We think that this sort of connection between these two would be really important. And it helps kind of, it really expands the idea of that park so that it actually, extends into the university now. There's upgrades to College Lake that are happening, just to make sure that hydraulically it works as good as possible. And Campus Lake is one of the lakes that's the most degraded right now. And so we have come in and said, look, we're just going to work with that. It's filling up. We're going to take the part that's filled up already and just kind of use some of the fill, turn it into recreation space, and just say, that's it. It ends there. From here on out, it's protected. We're going to make it a great lake. A new student hangout space is envisioned here because all of these old dormitories, the idea is over the next just few years, they'll be torn down and new buildings will be constructed in their place. So this kind of becomes a big front yard for all of that student life that happens there. Some images of it. So basically it'd be sort of in this zone is where you would see that boathouse. Upgrades probably need to happen with the bridges. There's no pedestrian access right now on that bridge. You can see places where erosion is happening. Here it's been someone's tried to deal with it with riprap and concrete that's been put in place. So this might be a section through that area. So here's the offending ditch, right? I tried to make a joke about earlier. Black Bayou, this is Black Bayou. But no, in reality, it's a real problem. And the fact that things like that are happening, we need to take that very seriously and figure out how to repair that. We've talked with homeowners a lot. We had meetings with them yesterday. We talked with other people today about some of these realities, how often these sort of overflows are happening. Why are they happening? There's a lot of history in pipes, right? There's pipes that nobody knows where they go, and that's part of the problem. It's a city. Things happen, right? Like this spill. But the reality, I think, is that there is a really great opportunity. This right now is just a ditch. Nobody thinks of it as something that once was Bayou de Plancher. It's just Corporation Canal. I can't think of a more beautiful name for it, right? Actually, Black Bayou would be an upgrade in the name. But the idea is that, look, let's take some of that nature that's already happening just on the other side of Stanford and bring it upstream a little bit, right? So that we can actually have a nice pathway, we can have some shade, we can have some vegetation that's not just grass, right? That we don't have to mow. There's like even savings there, right? That could actually be quite beautiful. And then there's already birds that you see that take advantage of this little bit of water that's coming through here, but it would be much cleaner now. It would just be a much more inviting space. And it's the gateway to LSU, right? So these sort of things would just put a much nicer face on that arrival. This is a floating platform that might happen with the restaurant idea or the cafe or just the student hangout. If there's crew, if there's just a place that's really beautifully crafted for people to buy or rent canoes and things, right? And just lots of indoor, outdoor connectivity. I think that's the key to it. So the idea is it expanded Wampold Park. It's extremely successful. It's a really pretty park. It extends it's not just about a park, it's actually about a roadway that's got a lot of traffic calming. So when you actually get on Stanford in this zone, you're already in the park, right? It's really quite beautiful. The idea is to expand that so that it actually gets a little bigger, so that the beach, becomes a more robust beach and we can start to do different things with it. We like the idea that, there's lots of, there's sand volleyball that's happening there. This green thing is some sort of little small, event space that could happen. Lots of pathways and connectivity back to the campus, but also looking at trying to solve some of the pedestrian and vehicular conflicts that happen, right here at Stanford. Expanded parking as well. So some of the things that are there, the boat dock idea and the boat slips, that remains. These pathways and things, those remain or they get upgraded. There's great lighting there that's happening. We want to expand upon that system already that already exists. And then you can see, some of the views. The water, the land is very low slung. A lot of this land was made in the 1980s when the last time the lakes were dredged. It's a beautiful spot. So this might be a vision of what it looks like in the future. So as we expand it out, we start to think about this beach. Maybe there's a hard edge. So kids with paddle boards and things, it's very easy to kind of put them in and out. And this is people, they're coming from off-site, right, that are using this. There might be a pier for fishing or whatnot, or just for boating. And a small event lawn. And we're not trying to do something particularly big here, but a thing that you can do, different types of events on certain Saturdays maybe. So certain times of the year, there might be, I don't know if it's a kayak festival or a kite flying festival or whatever it is, but things like that can very easily be accommodated if we design for them, right? And so you can have hookups so that, if there's an art fair or something, there's water and electricity and sewer connections so that all those sort of things are just built right into the fabric of the park. And it's all this kind of stuff that we want people, they're already doing there, we just want to make it easier for them to do it there. Okay, so the east side. So the main idea of the east side is let's work with how it's operating already, how people are using it. The big function right now is running, walking, strolling. We just want to turn the volume up so that that works really easily and it's not creating a bunch of conflicts that are there currently. So we have the existing roads that you can kind of see in white along here, and we have a new pedestrian or mixed use pathway that's down below, right? So where we've come out and we've taken some of this dirt out of the lake and we've pushed it up against the edge and started to create some new land. It accommodates a pathway, it accommodates habitat, it helps clean the water that we're trying to clean. So all this stuff does all those sort of things. There are places where strategically there's been certain little islands that have been put, and that's all about trying to create this synergy so that the bird opportunities are really work really well here. But basically that's it. We want to come in and there'll be some planting that'll happen so that there's lots of shade. We need to look carefully if there are places where there are benches and things that are placed into the place. If we do it, it's not trying to make, big park gestures there. It might just be a place that someone can stop if they're running and resting from time to time. All right. So this is what it looks like now, right? So there's, this crash barrier, right? A chain and a little wooden post. That's probably for parking, right? I don't want people to park here. So it's important. We need to accommodate parking in the right places. You can see riprap here where this erosion is trying to be dealt with. You can see sort of a higher bank here and places where it's a lower bank. But I think this is the most important thing. That's looking at the bird sanctuary, which in a lot of ways is just some soil that was left to see what would grow there. Some things were planted. But it's pretty amazing. So this might be a view of East Lakeshore Drive in the future. You have one-way road there with a bicycle route along it. You have this pedestrian path with some lighting along it. You see some land that's been built and this wetland shelf, and so all this sort of ecology is built into the fabric of this place in a much more robust way. And all of the conflicts are resolved. So that might be a little enlargement of it. These kinds of spaces along the edges. Very simple, not trying to call a bunch of attention to themselves. Comment cards. Okay, apparently you guys are supposed to write on comment cards. And you can make some notes, and some folks are going to come by and collect them. And then we're going to talk about some of the comments, questions, I guess. Hopefully they're questions. So phasing, right? That's a big part of all this. What happens when and how do we do all this stuff? So this is, we've shown a lot of drawings and a lot of ideas. There's a lot of engineering and cost estimating and all these things behind all of this. But at the end of the day, we have to build it. And so there are strategies that we're putting together through the cost estimating process about what we build and when we build it. So phase one is really kind of three pieces. The first piece of phase one is restoring the lakes, right? So that's excavating them, moving soil around so that things, all these other things can start to happen. By creating new land in places, conflicts can be repaired. People can use parks in new ways than they're currently using them. So that's restore. The second one is connect, okay? And so that is, as soon as we finish moving and making the earthwork, getting it all in the right place, then we come in and do connect. And so that's basically, we'll build trails and passageways and connectivity on top of all of that land that's been created. It's, we're looking at the different types of trails, and in a lot of cases they'll be concrete. We've talked about other things that we might use that are recycled materials. But all of those things start to then resolve some of these conflicts that we've talked about. And then the last thing in phase one is planting. So some planting has to happen just with regard to erosion control, right? If you make new land, you need to put plants on it just to keep the land in place. But it's also coming in planting shade trees, it's doing meadows, it's certain types of gardens. But that's the kind of the base package, right? This is just doing this is a very expensive project. Then, as subsequent phases, we have about 30 projects that have been identified in the cost estimate. Subsequent phases will then come in and be all of the enhancements, right? So if there's things like, say, the boathouse at City Park Lake, that's an enhancement. That's phase two. We have to make the land, we have to build the pathways, all that stuff now so that there actually is a place to put those things in the future. Some of the improvements at Wampold Park, that's phase two, right? We're going to make the land now, but that big beach and the, kind of terrace thing that we're looking at, those would be in phase two. So I think it's important to remember that when this series of meetings is over and when this master plan is done and we're out building all this stuff, your guys' work is not done. You guys have to keep pushing to make sure that when's phase two going to happen? When's phase three going to happen, right? We want to line all that stuff up so all these things keep going. Because nothing is better than, to make the next step happen than a successful first step. And we see everything really lining up for a very successful first step. Okay, I am going to, let's see. Oh, this will kind of walk you through how that works. So this is the green stuff. This is the land and the wetland sort of shelves that we're making. So that's part of this, the first part of phase one. The second part of phase one are the trails, the connectivity. And then phase three, phase two projects are all of these sorts of enhancements that will be happening. Now, Lake Crest. So Lake Crest is complicated. What we have done is we've gone back and we've looked at, actually, my mother used to, oh, these ones? My mother used to teach at Buchanan Elementary School. There she is. But Matt and I went out trying to see, is there a way to get a trail from the neighborhood that's behind there, and this is McKinley, to Lake Crest. There actually is an opportunity to do it, but it's on school property. There's a big fence on this canal here. Very complicated. We have not tried to encumber this, the project with that yet at this point, but it's something that we've explored. The other issue, or that we're trying to understand better, is there's a zone right here that's used a lot for fishing. As you approach it, there is a sign that says authorized vehicles only, keep away, right? Like it's, I don't know, some, a nuclear facility or something. There are some garbage cans that look like it's Breck stuff, but if you go on to any sort of maps that show ownership, Breck doesn't own this thing. So the ownership of this piece is very cumbersome and not clear. The idea, though, is that if we can get a trail or if we can figure out how that piece works, that we want to embrace that because it's a really beautiful little spot and it actually gets a lot of use. The other thing that's happening within Lake Crest is that we're hydraulically connecting as strong as we can the Lake Crest and University Lake so that there's not a bridge here, but it's a culverted crossing so that a lot more hydrological interaction happens within that zone. So I just wanted to be sure that everyone was aware that that piece is not neglected. Are you filling in the big ditch along West Lakeshore Drive? Which big ditch is that along West Lakeshore Drive? Oh, the Corporation Canal. Sorry. That's this piece. The answer is no, we are not. If anything, we want to enhance it at this point. There is talk about filling in this segment here as it goes through LSU. There's certain things that they can do with that. It's already filled in all that section there. But at this point, we are not looking at filling that in. It's very expensive to do those projects like that. And we like the idea of trying to enhance some of the nature that's associated with that zone. Okay, that was a good question, and it wasn't too hard because the answer was just no. Okay. Oh, this is a good one, all right. When lakes are drained, will the turtles / wildlife be relocated or, I guess, caught and released? Sorry, I'm a Lakes turtle fan. That's good, so am I. When I was a kid, we used to go out and count the turtles on the logs. The construction technique that we're going to use is cofferdams. So you basically take the lake and you divide it into, I don't know, 6 or 8 pieces, something like that. And you only drain one piece at a time. The university is very sensitive. A lot of clearly students come and are trying to decide what university they're going to go to. If they see a big empty mud hole for like 2 years, they're going to have a hard time with that, right? So what we want to do is be very sensitive to that. So we've come up with strategies for how the lake is drained piece by piece. So what we find with wildlife is that they're very resilient. They're very robust. When one piece is drained, they quickly go to the place that is not drained. Jeff, you told a story about a project that you just did not too long ago where you guys drained the lake, and within 3 days or something, the turtles were back? You built a lake. The turtles were there in 3 days. And within 3 days, turtles. So, it's a good question because the pelican thing, right? That's a big deal. The last thing that we want to have happen is after all this, the only pelicans are the ones that are pelican boats, right? Or the tiger boats, right? So no, we're talking with ornithologists. Like I said, we have ecologists on our team. They're guiding us to make sure that all the design and the engineering things that we're doing are focused so that these problems don't happen. Okay. Well, these are comments with lots of no's that are underlined a couple of times. But basically, I think it's questions that are dealing with events and expansion of park facilities, and how are we going to maintain these things? Any events that are planned, we have to think kind of big picture, right, of how this stuff works. Funding for these projects, probably we know that it's not coming from just people in this room, right? It's coming from people probably across the state. And there's other ways that funding may happen. There's bond measures, all sorts of things. But there's lots of people that will have money, tied up in these things. And so they're going to want to use these lakes. So we need to be sure that we think of ways that they do it. By letting people come out and have events 2 days, 4 days out of the year, whatever the right frequency is, it gives them a chance to kind of really participate and do something different. There's also revenue streams associated with this. When people come to the lakes, if you had a crew event, remember they stay in hotels and they eat in restaurants, and those tax dollars go back into the public coffers here, and they get spent on maintaining the lakes and doing things like that. So we're not looking at giant event opportunities here where we're having concerts in the park all the time and every weekend things are programmed out. The idea is really just to create places where you can have certain events that are very low-key and respectful of the neighborhood. Maintenance and upkeep. I'm not going to pitch that one to you. Our director, superintendent of BREC is sitting here next to me. But no, this is a big question. How do we go about maintaining these projects? There's a lot of different ways that these things are done in other parts of the country. Project we're doing called Buffalo Bayou. It has a conservancy associated with it, and that conservancy drives the maintenance. It's a public-private partnership, and they look at ways of trying to do fundraising, take some of the money. They're very much, it's a city park. It's very much a city park, but there's sort of this overlay that sits on top of it that says we want to maintain this park in a very special way. So there's possibilities for that. There's other things just that BREC is doing. Actually, BREC does if you look nationally at parks and recreation departments, BREC does a really great job. And I think that part of what they're going to be doing is studying these things that we're looking at putting in, and they're going to guide us towards things that they want to maintain and that they're able to maintain. Okay. Oh, this is my favorite comment. I love every bit of it. When will dredging start? Okay, this is good. Keep it that way. When's it going to start?
The answer is we don't know. Let's look at the possible process. We have to take this work, complete it, present it back to you in July. We then at some point have to convert this plan that you've said you either like or don't like, and I've read the comments, and I think many of you want us to make the lakes healthy and don't do anything else. I'm not surprised by that, and others want some of the amenities you've heard. But at some point, whatever we agree on as a community, we have to then do construction documents that translate these ideas into a place where we can then go to bid, right? So that would take some amount of time. We met with the Corps of Engineers this morning. Obviously, you have to permit all of this, and they think they can expedite it for us, and that might take 6 months. The largest question in front of us is how do we pay for it? We estimate the first phases that we've mostly focused on here tonight, which would dredge all the lakes and build those pathways and things we've talked about, is probably around $40 million, okay? I will remind you what I said when I stood before you in meeting number 1. We agreed to pay for the plan. We didn't agree to pay for the lakes, but we collectively have to find a way of doing that. And we have asked for some funding from the state legislature. And while this is a very, very dire time in the state's finances, we would like to see if we could get some support from that. And as we've talked about, at some point, we may have to ask the voters of East Baton Rouge Parish to include this in a future bond election. We don't have funding today, so we don't know the answer to that. But let's assume for a moment that we did. We think it would probably take a year or so to complete the work and get the permits in place. We estimate today that the actual construction would be maybe 24 months. And then we would have follow-up work as part of phase 2, where we'd come back in and plant the plants, plant the grass, do those kind of things that put the finishing touches on it. So if we had the funding today, it's probably safe to assume that it's 30 to 36 months from the time we start, if we had the dollars today, till the time we might complete the project. Now, I'm telling you that I'm not the engineer, and I'm not even a consultant. I've just sat with these people long enough for the last couple of days to kind of give you a ballpark. So it could be 3 years, it could be 4 years. And I would tell you that as these public projects go, if we got that lucky, it would be considered very, very fast, because this is a complex project. But the first piece is obviously identifying funding. And when we have the money, we will then determine how much of this we can do, and as quickly as we can, we would get the process started. Obviously, one of the things we want to do as part of that is to make sure that we keep this process in place so that as we move to those next steps, we are constantly hearing back from you. This will have some issues that you're going to be very uncomfortable with. It's going to smell. It's going to be nasty at times. We're going to disrupt traffic. Can you just imagine doing this in the middle of football season? Those are all the things that we've thought about behind the scenes that we will have to get into great detail so that we can tell the community when this is going to happen, and we're going to stay away from certain areas during certain times. We'd love to stay away from when the pelicans come, but all those things have to be thought out. So that's kind of where we are. I hope that helps. I would ask you not to hold me to it. I'm sharing with you what I think is a rough idea, but it obviously could change a great deal.
Here's a good one. Why 2 boathouses? They're different. One is a university facility. The other is a public facility. And these are phase 2 projects. They're all kind of being looked at. But we do like the idea that City Park actually has a facility on the lake that people can take advantage of. It's not a big facility. There's a revenue stream for Breck that's associated with that could be a very big deal about thinking about maintenance. And then the one that's to the south is plugged into the university experience. It's part of their recreation center. Whether or not the public is able to use that is a thing that needs to be considered and discussed. It's really, it's at this point, it's primarily about students, but we like the idea that it's a touch point between a university experience as well as the public coming there and getting to do certain things. So we talked about that with them a lot today, actually. Why not box culvert Corporation Canal and bury it? I've got a lot of comments about that. We have looked at it. Our environmental consultants, of course, do not like that idea. But it is very expensive doing these box culvert projects. There's a lot of hydrology issues we have to get into. So at this point, we have not looked at that. Okay, this is a really great question. Will the fill in the lakes cause them to overflow? All right. So we have GEC as our engineers. They're right over there. What's the answer, yes or no? Give it an up or down? Down. Will not flood. Okay, thank you. We move on. No, there's a lot of very complicated modeling that these guys have done to make sure that these lakes do not, that we know what happens, right? So basically what they do is they go in and they test the existing condition with the lakes. And they're looking at a 100-year flood event. 100-year flood event can happen any year, right? It's a 1% chance any given year that that will happen. They go in, they look at that, and they use that as a gauge. You don't want that to overtop anything. That's the thing that we've decided. So then they look at it after we have done the project. They model all the volume of water that may be reduced due to the project, things that we have changed about the hydrology, where water comes in, how it goes out, friction, all these sort of things within the system. Their model shows clearly that there is no overtopping of the bank. There's no net increase in water level. There's actually, this project reduces flooding and overtopping at City Park Lake, and at University Lake, it basically does no harm. So the answer is no. But that is a subject of very serious calculations. Timeline for the phases. I think John just talked about that. Oh, but this one also says, excellent work. Thank you. If we only have limited funding, would we only do City Park Lake? You could actually, yeah, because there's sort of a cofferdam built there already, right? It's that existing dam. I think that, and that's actually the lake that's suffered the most degradation, because that's where all of the, the big plume of nitrogen and phosphorus comes in right there. But clearly, the opportunity is to, let's do this all at once. University is a big problem. It's not, it's not like it's dwarfed by the problem in that lake. But you absolutely could if push came to shove. Okay, this one's about in the residential area that there's 3 separate circulation systems, one for walkers, one for bikes, one for cars. So the biker one, that's one that we're actually looking at in detail. We do think that it's always best to separate those wherever you can. There's little kids walking across pathways, or people with strollers, or just people looking at birds, right? And then the bicycle guys, they're always going a little bit faster than they should be going. So we want to minimize those conflicts. However, I do think in general this will be a multi-use trail that is appropriate for bicycles and for pedestrians. The idea with having moving bicycles off of that, or commuter bikes, or people that are going faster, you don't really have a lot of road bikes in this area. You have some, but it's not really set up well for that. But that would happen on the existing road. So that road goes to one way, and it's basically striping, sort of some urban design insertions into that road, so that there's a place for those guys to go a little bit faster. So the goal is really probably to have 2. Timeline, again, we already talked about that. This is getting good. Can we ever swim in the lakes? Triathlons are needed. I don't know. I mean, you could probably, alligators, I heard alligators. Yeah, maybe. That's a huge goal. We want to do that. I want there to be a triathlon. When I first started working on the project, when we did the interview, that we showed pictures of that. This is what needs to happen here. Then you learn a whole lot about the water quality and all the issues. I think that should be a goal that we have. Whether or not we can get there or not, I don't know yet. But what we are going to be doing is analyzing what's in that water right now. And after this project's done, we're going to come back and we're going to analyze what's in the water at that time to see what the net change is. We're going to be looking at then at that point, I think it's really going to get to this upstream thing, the stuff that happens, that 30% that was in the watershed, policy, education, getting people to change their minds. I personally believe that if you could get people upstream to do the right things, that you could absolutely do this. But that's going to be a thing that takes time and education to get to. Okay, this is some technology stuff. I think my engineer sent this one to me. But basically, it's saying, hey, look, why are we dredging these things? In 2008, the lakes were more shallow than they are today, basically, that the depth of the lake is just naturally receding, or it's getting deeper naturally. And why are the technologies used in 83? Why are we not using the technologies we used in 83? These are 2 very good questions. First of all, the way that you go out and you measure the depth of this lake is you take a rod with a little kind of flat thing on the end, and you just kind of stick it in the soil, in the water. So depends on who's doing that and how hard they push. you have to remember there's a bunch of muck in the bottom of that lake. And some person is going to measure muck, the top of that muck, and somebody else is going to measure the middle of the muck, and somebody else that's a little stronger and, I don't know, in a hurry is going to measure the bottom of that muck. So that's why there's big variation. Muck changes and moves, it's a technical word, muck, moves around from area to area as well. And this stuff is, I mean, it's constantly under these sort of hydrologic pressures. So at this point, there is some data that shows that the lake has a different elevation, but we don't think that's anything you can hang your hat on because it's not, firm ground that you're measuring against. The second one, which is a very good question, is about why aren't we using the same technology that we used in 1983? And the answer is simple, because it didn't work then. In 1983, they hit a bunch of logs and a bunch of stumps, and they basically just stopped. That project should have completely dredged the lakes, and it should have been good for 75 years, right? Here we are back, just it seems like a few years later, okay. But anyway, we're back a fairly short time later, and those problems have not been fixed. They've actually just, continued to grow. That project just kind of cut a little channel down the lake, and then that guy said, I've lost so much money on this job, I got to pack up and go away. So this time around, the idea is to actually drain them piece by piece, come in there with excavators and backhoes so you can actually pull the stumps out. You can grade the lake to the shapes that we actually want them to be. We actually want to mimic nature and how we go in and actually shape the bottom of the lakes. It's not just going to be some big flat thing that's just kind of 5 feet deep all the way across. But those are actually very good questions. Okay, am I done? Wait, what was this? Oh, this one's asking about, off-site. Are we taking the material off-site or keeping it on-site? Actually, that's a very good question as well. It's going to be a combination, we think. There's some soil. There's lots of different kinds of soils that we touch as we come into this thing, and some are suitable for certain locations, others suitable for others. Some things you'd prefer just to get rid of, not because they are degraded in any fashion. It's just they're heavy clays and things that are suitable for other types of uses. So at this point, what we're looking at is that maybe a third or a quarter of this excavated material would actually be relocated off-site. That gives us the opportunity of not making the lake too small, narrowing it down too much. We got a lot of pushback about some of the wetland shelves and islands that we're creating. Hey, you're getting rid of my lake. So we've taken all that stuff under advisement and said, you know what? Yeah, you're right. Let's take some of that and move it off-site. We've talked with LSU about some issues with it. There's definitely transportation issues of moving it. But there are places that we think we've identified that actually would like to have some of the fill. We don't want to put it all there, but some of it for sure. So.
I want to honor your time, so if you've got a burning question, we've got about 10 or 15 minutes left. If you'll just raise your hand and speak loudly, and we'll try to get you out on time. Yes?
Is there anything we can do now? It's an exciting project, and a lot of us may or may not be around to see it complete. Is there anything we can do now, such as changing some signage around, making the streets one way, repainting the dilapidated bike pathways that you can see there once was kind of a markers, adding reflectors, anything cheap aesthetics that we can generate some excitement about a project in actuality as opposed to on power.
I love the way you preface your question, and let me respond to that part first. I fully intend to be here to see this done. You're much younger than I am, but I'm still going to be here. The second piece is that from day one, all the people who have the answers to the question, your second part, have been a part of this. So those are BREC, City Parish, LSU, homeowners. And all of those people have the answers to whether we can do some of that or not. And I think the answer is yes. I think we're worried now about timelines and funding, but I think we are also taking literally long list of everything you've told us, and we've divided it up and said, can the City Parish do this? Can we give you a pedestrian crossing on Dalrymple before we have to wait for money to dredge it? Can we deal with the one-way streets? BREC has been in those conversations, and they are going back to the voters at some point in the future, and we hope that some of the things we've talked about that they can do are part of that next conversation with the community. Homeowners, almost 20 to 30% of the pollution comes from that side and that watershed, not you individually, but collectively. We can educate you on how to use the proper fertilizers, how to take care of your yard, how to minimize pollution and runoff. That's an educational program that we don't need to wait on, because every time we can educate someone not to do certain things, we start improving the quality of the lake. We have to do that even after we've done it. So the sooner we can get started, the answer is yes. So it's a very good question, and I think we need to be responsive on what we can do now and not wait on a lot of that. There's another question back here, all the way in the back. Yes, ma'am. Yes, please.
Yes, there was some talk about reducing Stanford Avenue down to Freeway.
I'm really sorry you brought it up. Now, let me try to give you, let me try to give you a candid answer. I'll try to give you a candid answer. We've looked at everything people have suggested to us. I think that conversation was largely driven by the fact that we are very concerned about high-speed vehicles with walkers and bicycle riders on Stanford, okay? The answer in reducing the lanes was to provide us extra space to create a safety zone for pedestrian bicycles. I think as I stand here today, overwhelmingly people have objected to that idea. So I think it's safe to say that while we're going to continue looking at it, we haven't found the perfect solution for that one yet.
I think if that stays on the table, it's going to create a lot more issues with traffic, because that's a main thoroughfare for 30,000 employees and students at LSU.
I didn't say it was still on the table. I said we're going to still continue looking at a number of things. But as we do that, I don't think it's going to be in the first couple of phases we've shown you here today. It's got a lot more work to be done. People are very, very concerned about it. There are some absolutely positive aspects of it in terms of safety, but there also are major concerns about traffic congestion. It's an idea, and we've got hundreds of ideas to do more work on, but you will not see that as part of this project when we roll it out in the first phases. That's as honest as I can tell you. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Okay, so the bridge on May Street, when it's actually built out, what's the projected length of the bridge and the height clearance for boats or anything underneath it to cross through?
About 200 feet long and about 12 feet clearance underneath. Did I get that right?
Probably maybe, we want to get it as low as possible. 10 is probably good.
Okay, 10 to 12. You ought to be able to stand up on a kayak and get underneath it. I hope you don't hit your head. Are there? Yes, sir.
Do you anticipate setting up a single governing agency to handle the entire project?
You talking about the construction side or the maintenance side? Okay. Yeah, I think on the construction side, we don't know, but I assume that there would be a firm hired that would do all 6 lakes, oversee both phases. But we're not there yet, and there's a lot more conversation that has to be done before we make those decisions. I think there's been a great deal of concern almost since day one in the conversations we've had with you that say, if we as a community fix these, how do we make sure that they are maintained appropriately? And we've had those ongoing conversations. We have 3 entities that control various aspects of it. BREC does a great job on their part, City Parish does some, LSU does some, but I think it's fair to say, and I think our partners would admit, there are times when that's not a coordinated effort. And some of the things we've looked at is how is this done in other places? How do we coordinate a maintenance system so that everybody knows what the other people are doing? There are times when facilities are overwhelmed. There are times when we come back after busy weekends and trash hadn't been picked up. It's not that people are trying, it's just there are a lot of activities going on. I think we'd like to find a seamless way of ensuring that when a light bulb burns out, someone fixes it. When a tree falls in the lake, we deal with it. When a flower garden dies, we replant it. We paint the light poles and we pick up the trash. None of our partners disagree with that at all. We have to raise the level of maintenance so that everybody's pleased with it, and we are concerned about it as you are, and we're going to try to find a solution with the help of our partners. Yes, sir.
I noticed that the schematics and drawings, there's a lot of concrete, especially on the walking trails, the pedestrian trails. Is there any way we could kind of minimize the concrete?
It's a great question, and I'll try to answer it from what I heard today, and you can jump in. depending on the user, we have different ideas. I mean, some people would really like to see a clay path. Some people would like to see a clay bed with some gravel in it that would be softer on the feet for bikers, for runners, and concrete or asphalt for the bikers. It is a matter of how much space do we have. It's also a matter of cost. We're trying to look at both of those, but it's a conversation we've had internally. We have had a group of people who represent all of the recreational users. So we've met with boaters, we've met with runners, we've met with bicycle groups. They've told us numerous times what is the best path that they'd like to run on, what is the width that the bicycles need to pass each other. We have that data. We're aware of it, and we know that there are better options for some than others. Concrete probably represents the most cost-effective, excuse me, that we can put down and maintain, because maintenance is part of the issue, but I'm not sure that we've made that final decision at this point. And we're open to those suggestions, but we're certainly aware that there are as good, bad, and better options for us out there. Yes, sir, please.
The bridge is formed to accommodate the people. Is there a good balance between the number of people using that crew and the height of the bridge for so few people that are using it?
Yeah, I think I don't think we're hanging the bridge on some rowers. I really don't. I think we are looking at numerous uses for that. And frankly, we've had that conversation. At what point is the return on investment worth it? We hope that we're actually improving water quality by connecting the lakes. And I think that's probably our driving concern. Can we really get the flow and the balance between these two lakes that doesn't now exist? We think that there are going to be people on paddle boats, maybe not in boats that look like white pelicans, but paddle boats that would want to go under the bridge too, just recreational users. But I don't want to underestimate the fact that LSU, that is a major partner with us, and the students who use that lake are very concerned about their access to the lakes, and that's rowing. But it's not one single concern, and I think we would agree with you that we wouldn't spend the money on that bridge if it were just that. We think there are a lot of good reasons to do that. That bridge will be expensive. And while we think it's very important, we may not can afford that bridge, but that's a decision like everything else up here we've got to look at. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned the boathouse, the access for college students for the paddle boating, kayaking. Is there, if that becomes an LSU only run facility, where the boathouse is really leisure, as I understand it, more rowboats, where does that leave kind of the young adult, other family users that don't have their own paddle boat but want to do things like rent and use the lake for that way? Like, how do we create that access?
Where do you start and I stop? I think the idea is, you can hopefully understand, is we're trying to accommodate a lot of different uses for this lake while also trying to preserve it to some extent for the residents who deserve to have what they invested in, and their expectations are also a high concern of ours. I think that the bird watching piece that we talked about is got a number of different elements to it that we're still working on, but I think we perceive that as a very public space, open to people who come from around the country. One of the things we learned when we started this project is that people actually do come from around the country today, because we are on the flyway and there are certain birds that they come to see certain times of the year. The idea is to have a public space on the LSU side where both you, I, and people from around the country can go to a place kind of out in the water and with binoculars be able to look at the birds that are on that opposite side of the lake, using that bird habitat in those nests to look at the pelicans up close, and that's something we can all share on. I think on the boating issue is partly what someone asked earlier: why do we have 2 boathouses? The truth is we had 3 at one point. We had one at City Park so that people coming in from that side could get into those leisurely boats. And keep in mind that if you've got your own kayak, you could launch it there. The LSU boathouse, we think, is going to be for students. And we actually had one at one time where we were talking about Breck could actually make them available at Wampo Park. We thought 3 boathouses is too much. But at some point, someone will tell us what's right and what's needed. But I think if you looked at both on the north side and even off of Dalrymple and off of Wampole Park, Kinder said there was a hard edge on some of those things that could be easily places where you could launch your own kayak or your own boat. So while you may own yours, you're going to have multiple access sites to the various lakes. If you want to rent one, we don't want those all over the place, but we're giving you one in the north part of City Park Lake. And LSU may or may not rent boats to the public. We don't know that yet, so we're in abundance of caution saying that's probably a student facility. And if there's demand, I assume that BREC would look at it as part of their WAMPO mission at some point. Yes, sir.
Could LSU and BREC partner on a boathouse? Instead of having two boathouses, just have one, let them share any expense of both?
I think all of that is certainly something we ought to consider. I think when we get into those things, we have to ask ourselves, okay, our students coming in with student activity fees, and they've got an ID, and that's how they pay for it, and they're not equipped to deal with the public in cash and those kind of things. But yeah, we're still in the planning stages, and I think all of that can be considered. Yes, sir.
The Main Street Bridge going to be accessible to cars also, as well as pedestrians?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a vehicular bridge. It's a vehicular bridge, 2 lanes like you have now, but with added width to make sure that we have adequate space for pedestrians and bicycles in a safe manner. A couple of more and we'll wrap it up. Yes, ma'am.
I have one question. Just trying to put together the funding. The project is absolutely marvelous. Is there some talk of pulling together the city followers, the leadership in the community, and put together some sort of, I guess for lack of a word, capital campaign with emphasis to put together this large amount of money in the beginning and then get matching funds some kind of way to kickstart this thing some kind of way?
We've had numerous conversations and continue to have conversations with various funding sources. It's a lot of money. It really is. And the ownership leads us to certain things. The LSU and the state own the lakes that are called the university lakes. The city owns the city lakes. And so you come to those two, and then under an agreement put in place long time ago, BREC actually administers and owns City Park Lake under an agreement with the city parish. But the state and the city parish and BREC are basically the owners. And so those are the public entities that own them, are the custodians of them, and you would assume at some point will be who we talk to about their means to help us, right? We've had those conversations. There are also other funds that, because we're on a flyway, might be able to be used here because we're doing things for birds and fish. And those are separate pots of money. And we're having those conversations as well. We're going to explore all of it. We have to collectively as a community figure out, are we going to let these lakes continue to deteriorate? And I don't think anyone believes that's the right answer. But it's also true that no one likes to pay more taxes, and that's true. And somewhere we've got to find a balance in a community conversation about how we pay for this. That may mean, as someone suggested, we do one lake at a time. I think that's very inefficient probably, because someone's got to come out here and stage this thing, but we're going to be open to that. And let me just caution, we are an entity that is trying to facilitate the conversation. The Baton Rouge Area Foundation is not going to pay for the lakes. I wish we could. We don't have those dollars. We want to use our role to continue this conversation with the community and your elected officials and see how we make this happen. The last thing we want is to have gone through this process with you only to have this sit on a shelf, because the lakes continue to decay, and we as a community have to figure out how we're going to pay for it and what we want to pay for. Yes, sir. Final question, please.
I'm not a hydrologist, but there's 2 ways to increase the depth of the lake. One's to dig it deeper, the other's to allow it to retain water. I assume somebody's looked at this, but I think the weir that drains that entire 7-lake complex is right there at Wampole Park. If you thought about simply increasing the level of the weir by a foot, 1.5, 2 feet, you automatically gain 1 to 2 feet of water.
You're hired.
You're hired. You're hired.
Send me your invoice.
No,
I think the freeboard on the lakes will take another 1 to 2 feet.
I've got 3 engineers lined up there, and they'll tell you that the plan is to put in a new weir there and raise it a foot. Am I right, gentlemen? Correct. You're absolutely right. We will do that. Are there any other questions before we leave?
That takes care of the dredge material, though?
Yes.
but it doesn't get rid of it. Yeah, we still have to move,
Take
400,000
that into
cubic
account
yards.
So our time is up, and let me thank you for your patience and for your involvement and for coming back. I know these have been long meetings and lots of PowerPoints. Thank you so much. Let's stay engaged. The team will stay here. I'll stay here. If you want to grab us on the way out and have comments, please come by and share them with us. And thank you again for being here.